My name is Harper Vale. I'm 31 years old, and the night my sister's children were found near a half-demolished construction site wasn't the real horror. The horror was discovering why they were there. Savannah had sent them in an unregistered car with an address I hadn't lived at for 8 months. The driver left them in a danger zone, and for 5 whole minutes, those kids vanished off camera. 5 minutes, no one could explain. When the police called me, their voices shaking, Mia whispered something that made my blood turn cold. But none of them knew the worst part. This wasn't a mistake. It was a pattern, and it was only the beginning. Before I continue, tell me where you're watching from, and hit like and subscribe if you've ever been betrayed by your own family. Stories like this aren't just drama. They're reminders of how far people will go when they think you'll stay silent. Your support helps these voices be heard. Now, let me take you back to where it all really began. I grew up in a house where love had a hierarchy, and I learned early I wasn't on the top of it. Savannah always got the first slice of everything: attention, money, affection, excuses. I didn't question it at 6 years old. I just absorbed it like kids do, quietly, the way wallpaper absorbs cigarette smoke. One of my earliest memories is a dinner table glowing under a yellow kitchen bulb that buzzed like an angry bee. Mom set a plate of buttery mashed potatoes in front of Savannah, scooping a mountain so large it touched the rim. When she reached my side of the table, her hand froze as if remembering something too late. She scraped the leftovers from the bowl onto my plate, thin streaks of potato, barely covering the surface. Savannah giggled through a mouthful. I pressed my fork down, pretending not to notice. I didn't know it back then, but moments like that would carve deeper cuts than any argument ever would. In school, the hierarchy followed me like a shadow. I remember winning a county writing contest in 4th grade. My teacher called home excited, asking if my parents could attend the small ceremony. Mom arrived 20 minutes late, breathless, holding a sequined sweater. Sorry, Savannah had soccer pictures, she whispered loudly, shoving the sweater at my chest. Try this on. It'll look good for the photo. Savannah posed with the trophy afterward, even though she never entered the contest. Cameras flashed around her while I stood behind them, clutching my certificate like a consolation prize. I didn't realize then that these were small rehearsals for a lifetime role. When I was 14, I earned a partial scholarship for a summer STEM program. I remember the patterned carpet of the guidance office, the smell of old paper and lemon cleaner, how proud my teacher looked. By dinner, the scholarship was gone. Mom said Savannah needed extra tutoring for her SATs and family supports family. I swallowed it, even though it burned like swallowed glass. Later that night, I heard Savannah laughing on the phone about going to the lake with friends instead. I didn't know it then, but losing that scholarship would become the first real fracture between who I was and who I was expected to be. By high school, walking home alone became routine. Mom forgot to pick me up so often the school secretary started keeping a spare umbrella for me. One stormy November afternoon, I trudged 3 miles through freezing rain. My backpack soaked my fingers numb. When I stepped into the house, hair dripping onto the floor, Mom barely glanced up from curling Savannah's hair for a party. Harper, don't drip on the carpet, she snapped. I stood there shivering, watching Savannah twirl in front of the mirror, golden and untouched by the world. I bit my tongue until I tasted metal. I didn't know it then, but that walk home in the storm would make something inside me harden, a quiet vow that I wouldn't let a child feel the way I did that day. By the time I reached adulthood, I had learned how to fold myself small enough to fit into whatever space my family left for me. After college, I moved to the city and took a job in auditing, steady, quiet, predictable. My apartment was barely bigger than a dorm room, but it was mine. The walls were thin, the pipes clicked at night, and the windows rattled in the winter wind, yet I loved the stillness. It felt like breathing for the first time without someone else's expectations pressed against my ribs. Savannah visited occasionally, usually when she wanted something. She would breeze into my building with oversized sunglasses and perfume that smelled like expensive flowers dipped in alcohol. Harper, be a darling, and watch the kids, she'd say, already walking past me, as if the answer had been yes long before she asked. Mia would cling to my hip, Gray hiding behind her, his tiny fingers wrapped around her shirt. They always arrived hungry, tired, wearing mismatched clothes. I never asked questions. Kids shouldn't have to explain the things adults decide. There was a night one I never forgot when Mia was 5. She sat at my tiny kitchen table swinging her legs while I reheated leftover soup. The radiator hissed like it was annoyed with me. Out of nowhere, Mia whispered, "Mom says you like taking care of us more than she does." My chest tightened. I stirred the pot, though it didn't need stirring. "That's not true," I said gently. "Your mom loves you." Mia nodded, but her eyes didn't believe me. I didn't know it then, but her doubt would return years later in a way that shattered everything. On holidays, the favoritism sharpened like a knife. One Thanksgiving at Mom's house, Savannah arrived late carrying designer shopping bags instead of food. Everyone rushed to greet her, even paused prayers when she finally sat down. I brought homemade pumpkin bread. No one touched it. Savannah brought cranberry sauce from a jar. Mom gushed like she'd cooked a 5-course meal. After dinner, while Savannah showed off a new necklace from Nathan, Mom pulled me aside and said, "Try not to look jealous, Harper." It's not attractive. I wasn't jealous. I was tired. Tired of being assigned feelings I didn't have, roles I didn't choose, burdens I didn't deserve. But the thing that mattered most, the moment that anchored everything that would come later, was a quiet Sunday afternoon when I took Mia and Gray to the park. The air smelled like fresh-cut grass, and the kids chased each other until they collapsed on the blanket beside me. Gray curled into my side and murmured, "I don't like when Mom leaves." Mia rolled onto her back, hair fanned like a halo, and said, "She says if we're good, she'll come back faster." Something inside me clenched so sharply, it felt like a warning siren. I didn't know it then, but that single conversation on that sunlit blanket was the thread that tied my future to theirs, long before any police call or courtroom. It was the moment I became theirs, in ways Savannah never truly was. The shift didn't happen all at once. It was slow, like water wearing down a stone. One small cut after another until you don't realize you're bleeding. The first cut came on a Friday evening in early September. I had just finished a 12-hour audit review. My back stiff, my eyes burning. I dropped my bag on the couch, dreaming of microwaved leftovers and silence. My phone buzzed before I even took my shoes off. It was Savannah. "Hey, I'm pulling up now. Take the kids for the night." No hello, no question, just assumption. I opened the door to find her double-parked engine still running. Mia and Gray stumbled out of the back seat, hair-tangled eyes half asleep. Savannah didn't even look up from her phone. "Their bags are in the trunk. Don't let them have sugar. I'm going to a networking dinner." Then she sped off. Inside, I watched Mia stand at my doorway waiting for something. When I knelt to help Gray with his shoes, she whispered, "We didn't eat yet." The guilt hit me hard, even though it wasn't mine to carry. I microwaved pasta and tried not to feel the old familiar ache. By the time they were asleep, I sat on the floor beside the couch, wondering how a mother could be so comfortable disappearing. That night, something inside me bruised. The next cut was louder. 2 weeks later, Savannah called me during a meeting. I let it go to voicemail. She called again. And again. After the 4th call, my manager raised an eyebrow. I stepped out to answer. Savannah didn't even say hello. "You need to pick up the kids from school, now." Her voice was sharp, annoyed. "I'm at work," I whispered. "You're closer," she snapped. "You're their mother," I replied, careful not to let anger show. There was a pause, then a bitter laugh. "God, Harper, don't make this dramatic. Just do it." I didn't go. For the first time in my adult life, I didn't bend. Savannah sent 20 texts after that. Margaret followed with, "You're embarrassing this family." I didn't respond. But their silence afterward was heavier than their words. Another cut came from a direction I didn't expect. Mia and Gray were at my apartment again. Savannah said she had a collab shoot and couldn't have kids in the background. We were drawing on the living room floor when Mia said quietly, "Mom says you get mad if we tell you things." I blinked. "What things?" She shrugged, but her eyes trembled. "Like men coming over. She said you'd try to take us away if you knew." The air in the room shifted. Gray looked up, his crayon paused mid-stroke. My heart thudded once hard. "You can tell me anything," I said softly. "Anything." Gray whispered, "There was a man last week. Mom said not to say his name." My throat tightened. Not from jealousy or judgment, but fear. Fear for them, fear for what Savannah was becoming, and fear of how much damage one careless adult could do to 2 small children who deserved better. I didn't know it then, But these tiny tremors were the warning signs of the earthquake coming. The earthquake hit the week before Halloween, though none of us saw the cracks forming until it was too late. I remember the exact moment the pressure snapped. It was a Thursday afternoon, the sky a dull gray sheet pressing down on the city. I was prepping slides for a quarterly conference, the kind of presentation that could change my entire career trajectory. My apartment smelled like burnt coffee, my laptop hummed softly, and everything felt still controlled. Then my phone lit up. Savannah's name. I ignored it. She called again and again. I turned my phone face down. For the first time, I felt something like power. Saying no didn't feel like rebellion. It felt like oxygen. 30 minutes later, she texted, "You're watching them this weekend. Don't argue." I typed slowly. "No, I'm not available." The typing bubbles appeared, vanished, then exploded into a stream of messages that looked like verbal shrapnel. "You're selfish. You owe me. You always ruin everything." I knew you'd be jealous. The last one stung not because it was true, but because it was the only story she ever knew how to tell one where she was the victim and I was the villain. I turned my phone off. For hours, silence wrapped around me like a blanket I didn't trust yet. I didn't know it then, but that single boundary would throw our entire lives into a storm no one was ready for. The next morning felt uneasy before anything even happened. A strange tension in my spine, like my body sensed something coming. I brewed coffee, repeated my conference talking points, tried to keep my breathing steady. At noon, while reviewing a slide about fiscal compliance, my phone rang from an unknown number. "Is this Harper Vale?" "Yes." "This is Officer Ramirez from Precinct 14. We have 2 children here, Mia and Gray. They say you're their aunt." My vision blurred. My mug slipped from my hand and shattered against the counter. "That's impossible," I whispered. "They should be home." There was a pause. They were dropped off near the redevelopment zone by Lakeview. The driver left them. They were alone for nearly 40 minutes. My knees nearly buckled. 40 minutes. In that half-abandoned district full of metal scaffolding, broken glass stray dogs, and half-demolished apartments, I felt heat rise beneath my skin, the kind that comes from fear so big it turns into rage. I'm on my way. The cab ride felt endless. Rain smeared the windows in long silver streaks, and every traffic light felt like punishment. My heartbeat kept skipping like it was trying to outrun the truth that was closing in on me. When I burst through the precinct doors, I heard it before I saw it. A soft, broken cry. Then 2 small bodies collided with me, Mia shaking so hard her teeth clicked. Gray gripping my coat like it was the last solid thing in his world, Aunt Harper Mia sobbed. "We didn't know where to go." Gray's voice cracked. The man drove away. "Mom said you'd be there. You weren't there." I held them tighter, my throat closing. "I know, baby, I know. You're safe now." But even as I said it, I realized something chilling. They had been missing for 5 minutes on the security footage. 5 minutes unaccounted for. 5 minutes that would haunt every breath I took afterward. When the officer asked me to give a statement, my phone buzzed in my pocket, Savannah calling. And everything in me went still. The courthouse felt colder than the October wind outside. The air inside didn't move, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. My shoes clicked against the polished floor as I followed Nathan and his attorney Reese Donnelly down a hallway that smelled faintly of disinfectant and old paper. My stomach tightened with every step. I had spent my whole life being quiet, small, forgettable. But not today. Not after what those kids endured. Savannah arrived 10 minutes late, wrapped in a cream sweater, hair curled perfectly, makeup soft enough to paint innocence. She dabbed her eyes dramatically with a tissue even though she hadn't cried. Margaret walked behind her like a shadow, glaring at me with the kind of disappointment reserved for criminals or daughters who refuse to obey. When the hearing began, Savannah's attorney, a young man with too much cologne and too much confidence, stepped forward first. "Your Honor, my client is a dedicated mother who made a simple mistake under significant stress. This situation is being blown out of proportion by her sister, who has a long history of jealousy and resentment." The words echoed through the room like poison. I kept my eyes fixed on the table in front of me. If I reacted, Savannah would win. She thrived on chaos. Reese rose next, calm, precise, dangerous. Your Honor, we have police reports, security footage, CPS assessments, and a consistent pattern of neglect. This is not a misunderstanding. This is endangerment. Judge Atwood's eyes settled on Savannah. Something in her expression softened, then sharpened recognition of the performance unfolding. Let's proceed, she said. Officer Ramirez testified first. His voice was steady as he described finding Mia and Gray covered in dust, shivering beside a chain-link fence. He explained how the driver left after Savannah provided an old address, my old address. One Savannah hadn't bothered to update even though I moved 8 months earlier. Savannah's jaw tensed, but she kept her eyes wide and wounded. I was rushing. I didn't think that seems to be the problem, Judge Atwood said quietly. Next came CPS Officer Kendra Lewis. Her report hit harder than anything I expected. Late pickups, missed meals, an incident at school where Gray was found wandering alone near the parking lot. A note from Mia's teacher saying the child often arrived looking tired and anxious. Savannah's composure cracked. That's exaggerated. People are always judging me because I'm a public figure. Reese stepped forward. Let's address that. Exhibit D. The screen lit up with video footage from the construction zone. The unregistered car pulling up. The driver hesitating. Savannah's scribbled half-address. The kids stepping out unsure, clutching their backpacks. And then the gut punch 5 full minutes, where they disappeared behind broken fencing before reappearing on camera, running in opposite directions, terrified. Nathan visibly swallowed back emotion. I pressed my hand to my chest to keep from breaking. Savannah's attorney stammered, "This is taken out of context." Reese cut him off. The context is 2 small children, left alone in a dangerous, partially demolished area while their mother was at a spa appointment. He slid a printout across the table. Time-stamped receipt. Savannah's face drained of color. Margaret gasped softly behind her. Judge Atwood folded her hands. Mrs. Vale Cross, this is not one lapse. This is a pattern, and patterns have consequences. The words hit the room like a hammer. I'm granting temporary sole custody to Mr. Cross, the judge continued. All visitation for Mrs. Vale Cross will be supervised pending completion of mandatory parenting classes, individual therapy, and ongoing CPS review. Savannah made a sound between a sob and a snarl. Harper did this. She hates me. She's always hated me. I met her eyes for the first time all day. No, I said quietly. You did this to your children. And for the first time in my life, Savannah didn't have a comeback. Just silence. Cold, choking silence. When the hearing adjourned, she stormed past me, shoulder-checking me hard enough to make me stumble. But I didn't fall. Not this time. I walked out of that courtroom with a strange, steady certainty humming under my skin. This wasn't the end, not even close. When I stepped out of the courthouse, the late afternoon sun hit my face like a slap. Too bright, too warm, too peaceful for the kind of war that had just unfolded inside. Nathan walked ahead with Reese, their voices low, urgent, already planning next steps for Mia and Gray. I watched them for a moment, feeling an ache I couldn't quite name. Relief, maybe. Or grief for the childhood those kids deserved but never got. My phone buzzed. One message from an unknown number. You think you won. Just wait. I didn't need a signature to know it was Savannah. I slipped the phone into my coat pocket without replying. The old me would have panicked, would have written a long explanation begging to keep the peace. That version of myself had died somewhere between the police call and the courtroom testimony. What stood in her place now was someone colder, someone who finally knew the cost of silence. Nathan approached me quietly. Harper, I don't know how to thank you. You don't have to, I said. Just keep them safe. His eyes softened. I will. But even as he spoke, I felt something tug at the edge of my mind, a memory, a detail I hadn't told anyone yet. Because when Mia and Gray were interviewed by CPS, there was something Mia whispered to me afterward too quietly for Kendra to hear. Mom said the man in the house wasn't supposed to talk to us. I hadn't told Nathan. I hadn't told CPS. I hadn't told anyone that Mia described the man's tattoo. A tattoo I recognized. A tattoo belonging to someone Savannah should never have been anywhere near. And I still had the photos, the dates, the screenshots, the timestamps that didn't match the stories she told. They weren't weapons. Not yet. But in the right moment, they would be. People think revenge is loud, a firestorm, but sometimes it's quiet. a slow tightening of the thread until the person on the other end can't breathe anymore. As I watched the kids climb into Nathan's car, Mia waved at me with a small, tired smile. Gray clutched his backpack like a lifeline, and I felt it again, the shift, the inevitability, the clarity that this wasn't over, not by a long shot. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, hit subscribe. Stories like mine aren't rare, they're just usually hidden under years of silence and keeping the peace. Sharing them is how we finally break that pattern. Leave a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I read everyone. And stay close because this story isn't over. Not for me, not for Mia and Gray, and definitely not for the people who thought they could bury the truth.